And hello, welcome back. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is KJ4YZI Eric with the HamRadioConcepts podcast, and we are on episode 7. Yes, I didn't think it would get to episode 7 already. I thought maybe I would lose steam or everybody would, tune out, but the stats have showed it, and the WRMI.net has received those messages saying that a lot of people like listening to this on shortwave. A lot of people on the podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify and iHeart and so many more are downloading it to their phones daily. So I'm glad that you're joining along. And this is something, again, different than when I started on Ham Radio, YouTube platform. I mean, I've been on radio since 2004, actually way beyond that when I was in CB. But, years I did videos on YouTube. If you're just now finding out about this podcast, you could type in Ham Radio Concepts on YouTube. And I showed about some bands. I had educational videos. I 550 plus videos on different, gears, what you could do with it, talking to the astronauts or satellites or using an antenna tuner or so much more. And then the podcast came out to, I just want to connect. I want to talk. I want to have a voice. I want to communicate and collaborate with other people, the viewers. It's not for me. It's for us. So if you have something you want to talk about in relation to this episode or any other, HamRadioConcepts@gmail.com. Send me an email. Remind me if I don't respond to you. Let's get this going. I have some people that want to talk about 6 meters. People that want to talk about youth on the air. All kinds of different processes or projects that I want to collaborate on for this podcast. So thank everybody for listening. Again, you can listen on WRMI shortwave from Okeechobee, Florida on 9.395 megahertz, facing North America and Canada, or North America in general, every Sunday, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 5.950 megahertz facing Europe and some in North Africa and wherever else that receives, because I've had signal reports on those frequencies from places that they probably shouldn't have heard it from. So if the bands are open, hey, you can listen to it. And you can thank WRMI.net. Go to their website, send them an email, and tell them, hey, I like the programming or you don't like the programming. Thanks for letting Eric buy these time slots and you enjoy listening to it or whatever. Send a signal report. Tell them where you're listening, what you're listening on. Tell them how it's coming in. And you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, Podchaser, Deezer, and so many more. They're all on the major podcast platforms. Search Ham Radio Concepts, all one word. And you can catch the episode that uploads to YouTube as well. So the topic of this video, sometimes I have an episode where it's, me talking with somebody else about this, notion in ham radio or that. Today is me. And this, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now. I'm sure everybody knows right now what's happening in Europe. And this is not a political show. I am not talking about the war. No. What I want to talk about was something I wanted to make a video on a long time ago. All I've ever said, and other people on YouTube or wherever, has said, when all else fails, ham radio is there. And I've dealt with this in hurricanes. I've had hurricanes. It's in a hurricane preparedness video that I made that was somewhat of a joke. Not so much of a joke, but I was very turned off and upset on how people were acting irrational and fist fighting because they did not prepare for a hurricane that they knew was coming days before. Now, all I've ever told you and other people was when all else fails, ham radio is there. So the topic of this video or podcast here is going to be what's in your go kit, as we call it in ham radio, and I'll explain that in a minute, or your emergency preparedness kit, and what are you actually going to do with ham radio? What are you actually, I've been telling you and everybody's been telling you, what will you actually do if you needed to use that? And will you know what to do? All right. I tried to get another person on with me on this topic, and they weren't, didn't have time, or they weren't able to join me on this, but he is a very, good emergency preparedness person. So I thought he would be good with this. It didn't work out. So I'll do this myself. But there's a lot of ways we can go with this, and this podcast goes anywhere, so I'll just start rambling here, okay? Think about this. Everybody relies on cell phones now. Everybody relies on internet. Everybody relies on, various means of communication that is the 21st century. But as I said, when it all goes down, what's left? Ham radio. Why do you think, different organizations for search and rescue use ham radio? Why do you think different organizations use radio in general? Because that is almost a medium of communication that almost cannot be interrupted. I mean, not going on beyond, radar jammers or frequency jammers or anything like that. You were not relying on cell phone towers or internet or, the satellite in space I can communicate with from a handheld on my, on the ground with a 5-watt handheld. Now, what can you do that? So we're going to break this down here. We're going to talk about stuff like this. First of all, we're going to go into what is a Go Kit. And then we're going to talk about what's in your Go Kit, what's in my Go Kit. I have a different way of preparing for stuff. I am not a doomsday prepper. I am not one of these people that think the world's coming to an end and I have to do this. But rest assured, how many people have came to me, my son, Michelle's sister, and everybody else. How many people have come to me over the years, and at first they laughed at the ham radio. Oh, he's a big geek with the antennas and stuff. Oh, yeah. And over time, whether they listen to my episodes or on YouTube or they watched other people or they thought about it, they thought, you know what? Even my neighbor, shout out to Sean. Hey, Sean. I know he's probably listening. But they all say, that really isn't a joke, Eric. You got some kind of, we're going to come to your house when, something happens. And it could be a winter storm. It could be a hurricane. It could be an earthquake. It could be a dam eruption. It could be a volcano eruption. Think about this. This is not just something that's happening in the news right now. This is not something that just I've been through. I mean, it could be an avalanche, for God's sakes. There's going to be a time when you don't have communications with cell phones, you don't have communications and stuff. And why am I in the ham radio? I did not get into ham radio because of this. There are people that have gotten to ham radio, and the first thing they thought was they had to make a bug out bag and they're going to get radio because the world's coming to an end one day. No, that's not what I feel. I don't think that way. Whether it does or doesn't, it's not why I got in here. I get in here because I wanted to talk to people. I was 9 years old playing with my dad's CB. My 10th birthday present was a CB radio. And from then on, I got into ham radio, and I'm still on CB radio every day. But it wasn't because of I like being in this hobby. Now, as one of my friends said before I met in Alabama, it's not just a hobby, it's a service. It could help people. Amateur radio can save lives, right? So normally, you'll meet a couple different types of ham radio operators in this hobby. If you're new to ham radio and you're hearing me talk and you're thinking that I'm not trying to be the Rush Limbaugh of ham radio, but listen to this. There's a couple different types of people. You got people that can care less if they ever have to use it for an emergency. They're not thinking about that. They just want to have fun. Okay? Then you got the people that are only into ham radio because they think the world is coming to an end, and they've used a lot of time and diligent, knowledge, education to find out every possible way they could use that for their own benefit, for them and their family. And that's fine too. But they don't get on and just talk with people. That's not their cup of tea. They just want it in case of an emergency. That's the second type. The third type is someone like me. I mean, there may be more than 3 types, but this is just the 3 off the top of my head. I am the one that don't think about emergency. I didn't get into this because of that. I like just talking on ham radio, but it has proven itself time and time again to me with a hurricane, a time or two, that I can communicate around my town and with others and get the up-to-date information on ham radio before it pops up on my TV telling me what the latest National Hurricane Center advisory, before I watch the commercials on TV when they want to hook you on the news media and wait for you to wait to that 11 o'clock advisory. I already had the information from ham radio. So I could use it for an emergency, but you know what? We don't have icebergs and avalanches and earthquakes in Florida, and hurricanes come half of the year. So, I can enjoy it the other half. That's my thing. So the 3 types, the ones that doesn't care about it, they don't have a Go Kit. The ones that have only a Go Kit and all their emergency stuff, and then the guy that's in the middle. Now, what is a Go Kit? I've made a couple of videos, and we've had, there's a lot of YouTube people that have Go Kit videos. A Go Kit. A Go Kit would pretty much be something that you would consider if there was a time that you needed to grab something and go. You're going to grab this bag or box or carry-on or whatever. And this is going to have what you think is going to be everything you'd want and need for emergency communications. And some other stuff, maybe some MREs or whatever. I kind of like, in my Go Kit, I kind of don't mix food and Band-Aids and flashlights with my ham radio stuff. That's a whole separate bag. If I thought I was going to need to grab that bag, I think I'm going to worry about that bag that's got food and water and everything before my radio gear. Well, I'll try to grab it at the same time, So a Go Kit, that's pretty much what it is. And there's been a couple of Go Kits that I've made in the past that were kind of rough, and I have one now, and it's decent. I am very not organized when it comes to doing stuff like this. There are other guys on YouTube that do ham radio channels. Man, they got stuff labeled. They got stuff, compartmentized and compartmentalized or whatever. I just take stuff as neat as I can with the patience that I have with what I would think would be useful in my Go Kit. For instance, okay, this is going to keep going on and on. There's nothing scripted here. It's right off the top of my head. My Go Kit. So I have a dedicated a dedicated HF transceiver in my Go Kit, a dedicated VHF UHF handheld transceiver in my Go Kit, and along with some other stuff, portable antennas, solar, battery power. Think about this. If you're going to grab a Go Kit, you're not going to be home with a tower. Now, let's say your tower fell down anyways in a hurricane and you have no antennas up. Well, I have the ability to go outside and spike an antenna in the ground real quick, whether it be a delta loop, whether it be an off-center fed dipole, whether it be a vertical, whether it be an inverted L, whether it be a wire hanging in a tree, whether it be, something hanging from the roof of my house. There's a lot of manufacturers that make portable antennas. So if you're going to grab a Go Kit, you're not necessarily going to take your Go Kit and set it up outside, I would think. You're going to take a Go Kit and you're leaving, right? This is worst case scenario, folks. I'm trying to brainstorm and think, what would I do, right? I don't leave for hurricanes. I stay here. The first thing on my mind is my house, my family, and then my neighbors. So I don't run from hurricanes. I'm not saying I'm, badass or anything. No, I am fascinated by weather, and I'm fascinated on brushing up my skills and utilizing what I know and have to weather the storm. I mean, I'm not right on the beach, and if it was a catastrophic event that would end my life or my family's, I would choose safety first. But that hasn't come in my lifetime or my realm yet. So if I'm faced with a Category 4 and I'm 15 miles inland and I have a block house right now and I know I can make, I'm going to stick. I stick here and stand it out. I'm not going to flee. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with fleeing. That's just me. I'm hard-headed. So if I was going to flee, I'm not going to leave all my stuff home. I mean, I'm not going to have time in an emergency situation to grab what I need and try to find stuff in my closet. No, it's a bag that's ready to go. That's a Go Kit, okay? I think everybody in ham radio that thinks that ham radio can be a valuable asset to life and property and human life, and your own benefit. If you think that ham radio can save your life and that is a valuable resource, then you should think about making a Go Kit. It doesn't have to be extreme. There are so many inexpensive options. Okay, you can get a Baofeng on Amazon for $25 for a VHF UHF handheld and have a 4 or 5 watt handheld to communicate with locals, because there's going to be people that are also thinking the same way, and they're, you can get on a national simplex calling frequency. In a state of disaster, you'll be able to find somebody calling, or, if you needed to call help, someone can, find you or listen for you. So you don't have, now if you wanted to be, advanced, you can get something like a D74 Kenwood and have sideband receive and listen to the National Weather Service and the aircraft or the hurricane hunters, on your handheld while you're sending position data on APRS, while you're listening to Morse code from other countries that are trying to assist them. If you really wanted to go into a high-end advanced handheld for that in your Go Kit, you can do that, but it doesn't have to be expensive. So not unfortunately, but all I have at the moment for my portable HF transceiver in my Go Kit is in fact the ICOM 705. And that's not by choice, really. It's my, we can go on days and days why I use portable operations more. Well, I'll tell you why. Because I moved into a trailer, RV last year. It's been over a year now. I bought a brand new RV, lived on my grandmother's property. That didn't work out. We went and bought a house. But in that process, I didn't have a, office and a ham shack anymore. So I learned to work everything out of my backpack for ham radio, so I can keep playing ham radio while I was parked on my grandparents' property, assisting her and helping her because she's elderly. And at the same time, I don't want to mount antennas on my RV, and I didn't want to put up a tower at her house. So I learned how to use everything portable out of my bag and have something that I could run on solar to charge my battery during the day without having to plug into anything. So if we did take the RV somewhere, I could sustain communications without having, a minimal footprint. So once that happened, then I moved into this house about a year ago. I automatically was still stuck on the portable operations with the, backpack portable and QRP, which is low power portable. My solar panel that folds up my backpack, my lithium ion battery in my backpack that runs everything for days. Solar battery backup, banks to charge phones in the event of emergency, or if we're portable, yada, yada. That's where I really, really got into this. And since then, I got a 250 watt tube radio sitting behind me in the closet. I may have some other radios to replace what I sold to buy this house and my tower up, but I really like the, portable operations. So that's really when I decided, well, if I needed to, or I just want to have a good day, I'll go to the beach. I grab this bag and everything's in there. So what's in my Go Kit? Now that I told you what a Go Kit is, what's in mine? Well, again, I like to think of the way I shop for radios and ham radio is I want to have all the features that are possible, even if I'm not going to use half of them. I'm not sure if there's a word for that, but I really like to have all this stuff that I may not ever use, right? So in my backpack, I do have a foldable solar panel that puts out about 70 watts. I got it at a ham fest. Folds up almost to about the size of a sheet of notebook paper, but then when you unfold it, it looks like a blanket on the ground. A solar charge controller, a lithium ion battery. Now, all those three right there are only a couple pounds. Then I have a lot of Chameleon Antennas. Chameleon Antennas makes a wide array of military-style, tactical, deployable, field-deployable antennas that you can pretty much fit anywhere. So in this bag, I have the MPass 2.0, which is a backpack modular portable antenna system that I could set up as a vertical, as a 2 meter 440, for sideband, or for, 2 meter and 70 centimeter FM, or HF vertical, HF horizontal. I can set up for a wire, a sloper. It all is modular. You can do what you want with it. And I have the Chameleon F loop, which is a loop antenna, a high Q loop antenna. And I have the Chameleon fan dipole for 20 and 40 meters. And I have the, what's the other one I have? A couple more of them. And so I have the antennas in there. I have my 705. I have my solar panel, my battery backup, which, 20 amp hour lithium ion battery from Bioenno. And a laptop. Why would I need a laptop? Well, because what if I want to use digital modes, right? What if I want to use something like PSK31 to talk over digital modes when single sideband voice may not work and AM may not work? Digital modes may work to get the message across if I had an emergency. Someone would relay it to somebody else. And, I could do RTTY, I could do PSK, I could even do FT8, but FT8 is really not going to be in emergency mode. That's more of just letting the computer make contacts for you, and that's it. So the computer also can plug into my little Anderson power pole distribution block, so the solar panel plugs into it, and then it will disperse one leg for charging my battery, one leg for charging the laptop, one leg for charging the radio. And I can deploy this radio or this the solar panel on the ground and have my laptop going. And I could, maintain HF communications as well as VHF, UHF with a handheld. I only have a little Uxun or Wuxon, WOUXUN UV9D. And I'll tell you why I have that handheld in my bag as well. Because one, it does all the VHF, UHF frequencies I need. Number two, I can use it for satellite. So guess what else is in my bag? My ELK log periodic satellite antenna. Would I think that making the satellite contact is going to be for emergency? No. But you can use things on those frequencies for downloading weather telemetry, right? So think about this. In an emergency situation, you may not have access to local news or a weather channel, right? But you can download on HF and VHF, you can download NOAA weather telemetry from space with a handheld or an HF radio, and having a directional antenna might make it even better. But that can all happen in, ham radio. So with that being said, I also have my laptop and my VHF, UHF handheld, and my ELK logged periodic directional dual band antenna for APRS. Now, APRS, the automatic packet reporting system, is more than just watching somebody drive down the road to Hamfest or go to the store and get eggs, right? A lot of people have really let APRS go to the wayside and laugh about it. There's only a couple manufacturers that are making radios with APRS native inside. I'm talking with a TNC on analog. Yaesu radios, they still put a TNC in their radios for APRS. You can send emails and text messages to cell phones right from the front of your handheld radio on a lot of Yaesus, like the FT VX8R. If you have the optional GPS, VX8DR, which I had, VX8GR, FT1D, FT2D, FT3D, FT5D. You can do all that with APRS. At the same time, somebody can look and see your GPS coordinates, and the GPS is built into the radio, and they can see where you're at on a map on their end. And you can also message across using digipeaters, or if the digipeaters, which are basically repeaters for digital modes, or for digital APRS at least, digipeater. If you didn't have that in range, you could bounce it off the space station. Now that sounds that sounds extreme, right? But if I had to, and that was my last resort, I may have to calculate on my computer where the pass is going to be going, look at the frequencies and stuff. But you could actually use the APRS digipeater on the International Space Station to relay a message if you had to. Okay, I'm not looking to say that that's how I'm going to make my emergency contact, but if that was the last possible resort, I want that option in my bag. You know what I mean? So these are all ideas on what I have in mind. Of course, I have a flashlight. Of course, I have a knife. Of course, I have some mastrant rope to hang stuff in a tree. You never know where you're going to need to hang a wire, but let's say you don't have a wire or a tree to hang an antenna in. Let's say you're in a desert, right? That's why I have the Chameleon spike. I can stick the thing in the ground and deploy at least one or two configurations off of that directly in the ground, or in a 5-gallon bucket full of sand, which is not going to fit in your Go Kit. You get the idea. If you're just listening, to take a break for a second, if you're just listening to this, episode 7, Emergency Communications and Ham Radio, what will you do with Ham Radio? What would you actually do with it? And what's in your Go Kit, or what is a Go Kit? You're listening to HamRadioConcepts podcast, and you may be listening on the WRMI AM shortwave, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. every Sunday night on 9.395 megahertz facing North America, 5.950 megahertz facing Europe and North Africa, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartMedia, or iHeartRadio, Deezer, Podchaser, Amazon, Google Podcasts, Audible, and so many more. You could download this and listen to it whenever. And hopefully it's something a little bit different that you could just listen to. And sometimes I have guests. If you have something that you've heard so far on this episode, you got something you want to talk about, remind me. Send me an email, hamradioconcepts@gmail.com. hamradioconcepts@gmail.com. And let's talk about it. That way you can get your idea. Because I know I've probably missed. You might be looking at the podcast and yelling at it. Wait, what about this? What about that? Well, I'm not the expert. I'm not an expert. And I'd love to hear about your ideas. Someone once told me, Bob, K6UDA, says, Eric, when I asked him about this a few episodes ago, and I said, what about your Go Kit and this and that? And he said, Eric, you're missing the point. You can't eat your radio, and when you starve to death, you can't make a contact on it either. So there's a lot of other things that go in a Go Kit and emergency preparedness for water and food and stuff like that, but I'm not the expert on that, and I don't have any of that ready, so I'm not going to talk about it. But let's continue on here about, so that's kind of what's in my Go Kit and what's, a Go Kit in general. Now let's talk about a couple other ideas though. If you're going to use this for ham radio for emergency preparedness, right? You got to understand something. You may have gotten a ham radio license, right? As a lot of these people I know have done. They saw me with my ham radio stuff for years. They laughed about it. There was no war going on. There was no hurricane season that year. And they thought, well, yeah, okay, I got my guns and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But think about this. Now they have, these people I'm highlighting, have their ham radio license. Or they have a ham radio and they don't have license. Because there is this little thing out there, let's call it, that, in a natural disaster, in a case of a doomsday scenario, no one's going to care about your license. And there are people that have told me, Eric, I'm not going to get a license because when hell breaks loose, who's going to ask me for my call sign, right? Okay. Well, let me challenge that. Let me talk about that for a second. And I'm going to tell you why. There's a reason that I have pushed and tried to help this hobby, and a lot of people on YouTube as well, and other places, in the ARRL, wherever the case, on why you should get licensed and educate yourself on ham radio. Why? Okay. So the big guy that's got the radio, I bought this radio, it's stuck in an anti-static bag in my closet under my staircase, and when the hell breaks loose, that's what I'm using. Well, guess what? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Right. They have no idea how to use it. You got to understand something. Having a ham radio license and educate, first of all, getting yourself a ham radio license is just the starting point. You have to know how to use that. You have to teach yourself about all kinds of things. For instance, here's a knowledge check. Here's a quiz for you. For those who are licensed and listening. So, someone's got a radio and it's 1:30 in the morning and they jump on 10 meters and they're calling for help. Well, why would they jump on 10 meters? That's not a daytime. That's a daytime band mostly. That closes at night mostly. Exactly. See? Part of your exam will give you the idea about the F1, F2 layers and the D layer and stuff about what happens at night when the two layers combine and, propagation ceases and it goes down to say 40 and 80 meters. What if someone's calling in the middle of the day on 80 meters? They just want to dial, having a ham radio or having a ham radio license doesn't do you any good if you don't know how to use it. Okay. So what if somebody's looking in an emergency situation? Again, this is the last possible resort. This is the worst case scenario. Now they got, let's call it an ICOM 7300. And they got this thing set up with a portable dipole in the backyard. And someone's on 80 meters and they're calling for someone at maybe 3 streets over. Well, if you would have known about ham radio, you could achieve the same thing day and night on VHF and UHF with a simple handheld. You see? So you got to educate yourself on what bands work during the day, what bands work during the night, which bands can work coexist during the day or night, or gray line, or why would you want to use a band that could potentially work into Australia, 17,000 miles away, when you're talking to somebody that may be 5 miles away in the same city? You're looking for help or assistance in your immediate vicinity. You wouldn't use HF. You could, you might have, but first thing I'm going to do is resort to VHF, UHF, APRS, and try to connect with people in my local area. Okay? Somebody in Puerto Rico that may be hit by a hurricane or an earthquake that needs to talk to somebody in Hawaii may use HF on certain bands during certain times of the day or night to make that communication to talk to friends and family members. Does that make sense? So, and then you're talking about a satellite, which, again, wouldn't be an emergency situation. That'd be more for fun. You could use it for that, okay, if you can get through and get a mayday call or something. Not mayday, but, a distress call through a satellite. Then anything goes because it's line of sight. So it could be 3 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the afternoon. And, when the satellite passes over your head, it's going to work. But did you know that? Did you know if you're listening to this podcast and you have a ham radio or you just got licensed, you memorized the questions to answer on the exam, now it's sitting in your closet and you're not exercising it. Have you remembered what you memorized to get your license? That's the kind of things I want to stress. Okay. And then there could be Morse code. There's certain bands that are really good for Morse code. There are 5-watt Morse code transmitters that I have 1 or 2 in my closet. And the guest I wanted to get on this podcast this episode, who couldn't make it, I know he's got a couple of them as well. And he is, proficient at CW. And if that's the means of communication, and you can do a lot more with CW than you can do with voice. That's CW's Morse code. So we've talked about what is a Go Kit. We've talked about what's in my Go Kit. We've talked about the difference in knowing what you're going to do, like how you're going to use your ham radio, or getting a license and educating yourself and practicing it, or just having a ham radio because when, the proverbial poop hits the fan, you're going to have an answer, right? It doesn't really necessarily work that way if you don't know how to use it, right? But how about this question now? What are you actually going to do? What are you going to do? So you got a ham radio, whether you have a license or not. You have a 4,000-foot antenna circling 20 acres in your property. What are you going to do? Are you going to call for help if you need help? Are you going to respond to help if someone needs it? You have to think about that too. If you feel that, you're okay and you got this under control, and that's because you want to be out there to have information, to weather the storm or to deal with whatever you need to deal with in your situation of emergency. Here's another group of people. Okay. Remember we talked about before, we talked about this kind of ham radio and that kind of ham radio operator. Here we go. You got the guy that's not going to do anything but listen for his own benefit. And I guess nobody's obligated you to be a superstar or a hero. You don't have to be there waiting if you have your own family to worry about. And then you got the person that is going to be gung-ho to make sure he can offer every bit of assistance that he can to benefit somebody's life and property. And that's why he wants to do it. That's cool. Then you got the person that's going to be in between, that's not going to turn the radio on, right? Or they're going to turn it on and they're just going to listen. You got to know something. If you have that radio and you have that ability, okay, first priority, if in an emergency situation, this is part of your test, if you're getting licensed. If somebody's calling a distress call, everything is to cease and stop for the humanitarian aid of human life and property, that you're going to, if you can hear them and you're adequate to respond, you need to do what you can to do that. Because that may be you on the other end one day. But I asked somebody one time, here's a story. I asked somebody one time and I said, you ever had a distress call? And he said, well, actually, I was the one giving the distress call. And I said, oh, and he told me the story that if it wasn't for ham radio, he was in the Navy. They got lost at sea or something down in the Keys, off the coast of the Keys, a naval base down there. And he said if it wasn't for a ham radio guy that was in some other state that heard me and relayed it to the Navy and the FCC or whoever, that he would have never been found, right? So just be prepared that, as part of your test question again, if you have the ability to reach out and respond to somebody calling with a distress call, somebody that has an emergency or a life-threatening endangerment, are you prepared to make that? You don't have to get out of it. You don't have to go in harm's way and help them if it's not safe to do so, but you need to know how you can relay that information to the appropriate people. Let's say the phones are down. Let's say internet's down. So you hear someone calling a life-threatening distress call. They need help right now. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to know how to relay that? Are you going to know what to do? I mean, you're not going to get in your car and drive 5,000 miles. You're not going to, so what are you going to do? Now, I don't know what I'd do in that situation. I don't know. I know that I would probably have in my little book of notes here some key frequencies That would be, government. There are some frequencies that government officials, weather officials, and stuff monitor in states of disaster. And I listened to some of it in the hurricane in Puerto Rico, and they got hit a couple times, and they closed the traffic. You weren't allowed to just rag chew. This is for priority traffic only, emergency traffic only. Now, I wrote down a couple of those frequencies, and if I heard a distress call, I might not know what to do. I might ask a couple of questions. First thing is get location, this and that, blah, blah. And then I would try to get to that other frequency, try to assure them, don't move frequency, stay here, and change frequency, and tell somebody, hey, you got to get on this frequency. They're in this location, so they know where to turn the beams. So you got to kind of know something about heading and location and grid squares. If someone's calling and they say, oh, Fox November 21, are you going to know where that grid square is? Well, if you're one of those macho men that have that ham radio in your pickup truck and you say, well, when it comes down to it, I don't need no ham license because I'm going to be on that radio. I'm going to save my life. Evidently, you don't know what a grid square is. You might be in trouble when you put that mic in your hand. You might be transmitting in between ham frequencies. You might not even be on a ham frequency. If you don't know about ham radio, you don't educate yourself, it's not going to do you any good to get on that radio and have a radio if you don't know how to operate it. So here's a parlay into this. First, I want to thank my sponsors again. First of all, let me thank everybody on Patreon. Guess what? Patreon people, patreon.com/HamRadioConcepts. The folks on Patreon that have generously threw me a buck here or there has added up to pay the shortwave bill. This costs electric to get this out on shortwave, and it costs money to be on the platforms of Apple and podcasting around the world. That costs money. You guys are putting your hard-earned money to work. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. If you're so inclined and you like this kind of programming and you want to see more of it, throw me a buck or two at patreon.com/HamRadioConcepts. patreon.com/HamRadioConcepts. Thank you to everybody who has been doing it for years because it helps. Little generous donations I get, I can put that towards this and keep doing this. Now, I also want to thank my sponsors, and this is a parlay into why I'm thanking my sponsors, Ham Radio Prep. So, right as we just talked about this, so you got a ham radio and you don't know how to use it and you're not getting licensed, consider this. If you go to HamRadioPrep.com, and you can use the exclusive code EricPodcast20, all one word, EricPodcast20. You'll save 20% on every course that you decide to buy. And the courses will teach you, they'll teach you some of this on how to use ham radio and what it means to call CQ and why we do this. There are theories and answers out there on what is the purpose of ham radio. It is a test question to promote the safety, to promote the phases of the radio art, and I'm trying to do this verbatim here, and to pursue the assistance of human life and property from danger, something like that. That's kind of, I know what it is if I thought about it for a second, but to promote the better welfare of human life and property, and to promote the phases of the radio art, So that's what it's for. That's why we do it. But in Ham Radio Prep, they will teach you in this with interactive stuff, with video clips, with games and quizzes to help you understand what you're testing for and to not just think it in your head, memorize. Okay? And so Eric Podcast 20, you save 20%. Now check this out. This is first, you heard it here first. Ham Radio Prep, for those who have known that I've been a true follower of them and I love their program. For those who know and have heard me talk about Ham Radio Prep for a long time, Ham Radio Prep is now beginning and has created the American Radio Club. The American Radio Club is going to be a successor to Ham Radio Prep. Now think of this. So you go to Ham Radio Prep and you get your license. Now what? Exactly. AmericanRadioClub.com. Their number one mission is to advance the art of amateur radio and to keep the history of it alive and thriving as well. They want to pave the way for an even brighter future for all those interested in ham radio for many years to come. So you get your license at hamradioprep.com. You don't get it there. You study for it there. They help you study. And then you get it. Now what? Well, there's going to be a huge group organization and community effort with, introduction to ham radio and how to use different things and who to talk to. Elmers, people have been doing this for a long time. Community forums, chats, videos, stuff like that. To where if you want to, learn how to first get on HF, now that you've got your license, you'll have the opportunity to talk to the right people who will, enlighten you and steer you in the right direction. Instead of just, Ham Radio Prep wanted to say, instead of just you getting your license and we help you get your license and we never hear from you again, why not join and be a member of this community, which will really advance your hobby and your skills for ham radio. And at the same time, allow you to have, there's a lot of times that people get ham radio licenses and then they get the license and they have no clubs around. They don't know anybody in their area. They don't have anybody to talk to, no Elmers, nobody to show them how to use their first radio. Or maybe they got their license, they don't have radio yet, and they want to play with somebody else's. I'm sure there's somebody out there in Podunk, North Dakota, 500 miles from anybody that's got civilization, and they have nobody. Well, you'll have somebody at American Radio Club. So go to AmericanRadioClub.com. And if you use the code ERIC20, just like on my YouTube videos, they will also give you a 20% discount on becoming a member. So I asked them for that, and I said, listen, if this is going to be this cool and this is going to grow into this, can I have another code to help my viewers and my audience to get involved in that? And they said, sure, use the same one. So you can use ERIC20 at AmericanRadioClub.com to become a member and follow along with this. A huge forum is coming. There's a lot of stuff on the way, and it's there now, but it's going to get even bigger. So I hope that you'll see a lot of me on there. Maybe I can make some instructional videos on how to work satellites and how to do this and how to do that. And you can go there, and as a member of the amateur community and American Radio Club, you will have you'll be one of the first ones there. And as this grows 5 years from now, you'll remember this podcast. So check out AmericanRadioClub.com and HamRadioPrep.com. Again, use the code ERIC20 or ERICPodcast20. You can save 20% on everything on the course that you buy to study for your license. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up here because I'm rambling. And again, unfortunately, at the last minute, I had no guest here that I wanted to get. So we kind of ran it ourselves. But we're going to recap here. Shortwave is, I think, another medium for emergency communications. You might be listening to this on shortwave, and guess what? Nobody can turn it off, right? I mean, you can turn the shortwave station off, but you listen to talking to the people right there coming out of your speaker. If you're listening to this on shortwave, listen to my voice over AM radio. Thank you for listening on shortwave, and thank WRMI, because I have researched some shortwave stations across the country and the world, and some of them don't have good programming. And I hope that of your shortwave listening experience, that you like the programming for this hour or lack thereof, that you like what you've heard and you like my efforts. So send WRMI a message, tell them thank you. Give them a signal report and send me a message at HamRadioConcepts@gmail.com with your location, your listening conditions, your signal report, and let me stick a pin on the map on the wall so I can see where you're listening from, and you can be a part of the shortwave listening wall here on my room. I don't have much more to talk about here. The podcast is going to be over here in a minute because I'm just kind of out of steam. I just want to remind you that I do work all day, every day except weekends, but then that is a job. When I come home, I have a lot of stuff to do at home that still needs to get done, and then I choose to have to do this podcast and my YouTube videos, which I'm far behind on. I do have a couple new toys. I do have, from Radio Waves, I have the Quasi, which is a cubicle quad, 2 meter, 440 directional antenna that I'm going to use for moon bounce, Earth, Moon, Earth, EME, moon bounce for my backyard with my 705. And if you want to follow along on that, check out Ham Radio Concepts on YouTube, subscribe, and when that video comes up, when I get time, I got to show the video of the antenna first. It's still in a box from Hamcation when I got it. It's still in a box in my closet. I'm going to get to it. I also have some other stuff, talking about this episode with emergency communication. I have some other basic antennas because you don't have to have anything extraordinary like I talked about in the beginning of this episode. So I have a couple of, inexpensive dipoles, and I'm going to show you how to make your own dipoles. You could throw some string, a little, feed point in there with some copper wire, make a quick dipole, and get on the air in the most modest conditions. Okay. So these kind of things I want to make videos on. I just apologize. It is very hard for me to get time in between working and doing this. It is a full-time job. I'm not quitting my job to do this, but I'm not quitting my YouTube to stay with my job either. I got to balance them both. So if you do appreciate that, again, I would really appreciate it. Patreon.com/HamRadioConcepts, because then maybe I could hire some automated things to run some things on here and to keep my, have my friend help me do the website and keep the mailing list up, because I just don't have time for it. I really don't. And my wife wants to get her license, and she's wanting me to study with her because she's wanting to ask me questions instead of just memorizing. And I don't have time for it. Now I've let my wife down because she wants to get her license, and she keeps asking me and begging me. And then her mother-in-law, or her mom, my mother-in-law, came in and said, you know what? I'm going to do my license just because I need to help her because you don't have time. That kind of hurts my feelings. My wife has asked me for years, and unfortunately, she just got put aside too for you guys. So don't let her hear this, although she listens to every one of these episodes, so I hope she doesn't take this to heart, because she'll really be kicking me in the butt. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for listening. Let's give a recap real quick. You can listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can listen to Amazon, Audible, Podchaser, Deezer, Google Podcasts, and so many more. Search Ham Radio Concepts, all one word. Okay, a lot of people said I can't find it. All one word. Also, 9.395 megahertz AM shortwave, 5.950 megahertz AM shortwave, every Sunday night, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Listen to it on WRMI. And with that, I guess I got nothing else. Listen, send me an email if you're interested in furthering this with your ideas on what's in your Go Kit and what you think I missed. And let's get a group going here. Remind me if you don't hear from me on the email, because I'm super busy. Let's get 4 or 5 people together and let's collaborate on the podcast on what's in your Go Kit and what could be better or suited for an emergency if that happens. Remember, I'll finalize it with this. I've been telling you for years, when all else fails, ham radio is there. And it could be a snowstorm. It could be a search and rescue. It could be an avalanche. It could be a shipwreck. It could be out in the middle of the ocean. It could be a earthquake. It could be a war. But if you don't know how to use your radio, just having a ham license and a radio does you no good. So thanks for everybody for listening. We're going to be 10 minutes short here on the podcast, but man, I got to get some other stuff done around here. So 7-3, thank you everybody for listening. More podcasts are on the way. This is KJ4YCI 7-3.
Ham Radio Concepts is brought to you by HamRadioPrep.com. It's never been easier to learn about ham radio before you take the exam. And Ham Radio Prep makes it fun and guarantees your success. Visit HamRadioPrep.com. Use the code ERIC20 to instantly save 20% off every course you buy. Remember the name, HamRadioPrep.com.